Hello. Thank you so much for coming. Woo! So for those of who I don't know here, which is like maybe some, but it's most of my family here. So. I'm Bee.
I'm Rose.
And this is our show. We've been writing this together since about June or July or maybe 7 years ago. I'm not really sure. But I met Rose in a basement full of women in the fall of 2012. We were both auditioning for another show at the time. And I remember being so nervous that I almost didn't go. I didn't really know anyone there. I didn't know anyone, actually. And I hadn't performed on a stage since high school, which at the time was about 7 years behind me. I remember Rose rushing in. I think she had biked half across campus to get there. And after we became friends, we remember reflecting on this day, and we both seeing each other that evening and saying to ourselves, I want to be her friend. And I've always really loved that part of our relationship, how mutual it was from the very beginning to crave to know each other, to know someone so well. Thankfully, over the years, our influence on each other has been healthy and inspiring because I don't believe we've ever told each other no. From co-directing our first production together here in Lansing in 2014, and again in 2015. And then she moved 3,000 miles away to Alaska. But ever so subtly, she would remind me very often of our dream of writing our own show. Some may think because of all of our endeavors, we must have all this extra time in the world, but it's not true at all. We're both small business owners, and I've literally been growing someone else's eyeballs since we've been writing this, which I think is also really cool. More eyes on the prize. But through it all, one solid life skill has remained the most remarkable with us, and I hope to inspire all of you to use it in your own lives and your own relationships. And it's the skill of trust. Without it, I don't know if Rose and I would even be friends. Seeing as I've actually never hung out with her in the summer in Michigan, I'm sure she exists when it's hotter than 65 degrees here, but she's always been traveling. I also don't know if we ever would have written this show without trusting that the other was putting in the work. You see, when your best friend moves to a remote fishing town of 60 people without any cell service or barely any internet, only dial-up, you either panic with serious FOMO or you just hope and you release yourself from worry and hope that they know how much you love them and you know how much they love you, and you both commit to your promises. I've chosen the latter throughout our whole relationship, and here we are. Some of our material will be very triggering for you, maybe. If at any moment you need to take a break, listen to yourself, do what you need. The exit that you came through, the entrance that you came through, you can exit that way, or you can just go to the bathroom back here down this hallway. There's also some water back there. And then, for the sake of being present, please silence your phones and refrain from taking any video.
I'd like to introduce a couple of our other performers tonight. I'll start with Phil and Katie Jo. So they'll be doing an acro yoga performance towards the end of our show. And, you know, Bee and I really wanted to include that in hopes that their piece will remind us all of the importance of both words and movement as we strive to better ourselves through the hardships of this life. We also have music throughout the show by Ryan DeLuca on the guitar and Brandon Rutt on the drums. This show would not be complete without these performers. So we are forever grateful for your willingness to be a part of this. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And as many of you already know, the funds raised from today's show will benefit the MSU Sidewalk Poetry Project, an initiative developed by my former professor and since then my writing and life mentor, Dr. Nancy DeJoy. The Sidewalk Poetry Project celebrates the creative spirit of the Spartan community by displaying poetry as public art etched into sidewalks throughout MSU's campus. I can say that from my time at MSU, that Nancy is one of the most compassionate professors I have ever had, bending over backwards to help her students both establish and reach their goals. She believed in me and my passion for writing so much that even in the years after graduating, She's continued to mentor me and provide feedback for my writing on a regular basis. It means so much to me that after nearly 6 years of Nancy's leadership, I finally have the opportunity to give back to her cause. If you feel called to make an additional contribution, you can donate online at givingto.msu.edu. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Nancy to start off our show with a piece of her own. Nancy DeJoy, everyone.
I'm fine. Like many people who lose a loved one, I had to return to work soon after my friend Susan died. What I remember most was that the people I was not close to would ask me very seriously, "How are you?" "Fine," I would say. This seemingly small and personal story is an echo of something large and universal. As I read Rose and Bee's work, I realized that all of my life I have been telling people I'm fine as a kind of shield. Fine when sexually assaulted in the 5th grade and every other time. Fine while flunking out of college the first time because no one believed I was smart enough to make it. Big boobs, flighty girl, bird brain. Fine when sexual harassment in the factory and bars I worked in made me have to strategize and use my words on bullshit and assholes. Fine when I worked 2 jobs and didn't make enough money to survive. Fine when I lost my daughter to a system I couldn't support her in. Fine as I walked through the world untethered and unmoored because everywhere there was the danger of abuse. The bus stop, the bar, the bed. Fine, fine, fine. And everyone always said, "Nancy's always fine," as if this was a good thing. The same way that they have to believe that we are all fine in a system that shuts us down and shuts us up. It was women authors and women friends who dared not to be fine who woke me up. Some needed help and some saw that I needed help. Audre Lorde, Gloria Steinem, Jody Hirsch, Samantha Early, Laura Ledford, Susan Applegate Krause, Debbie Dooley, Terry McCauley, Nicole Fountain, Jody O'Gorman, Leonora Smith, Laura Ledford, Amanda Fields, Kitty Geisler, and others, including hundreds of students, and Rose and Bee. Over time and even now, these women open doors where I can wake up and stay awake in the consciousness that we are, none of us, fine in this sexist world of injustice and inequality. These women face their vulnerability. Don't hide behind a shield of being fine in a world where being fine is just a code for making it through the things we shouldn't have to make it through. A world in which "she's so fine" is in fact just another version of the sexualized, objectified female body. We are, none of us, just fine in this world, but we can be vulnerable and strong, needed and in need, loved and loving, inspired and inspiring. We can get past the pretense, peel back the layers, find ourselves and one another. I am not fine, and neither are most of the women I know. Sorry. We are more fierce than fine, more vulnerable than fragile. We own our sorrows outright. They are not debts that we carry in silence, traded for being fine with the way things are. We are not fine. I am not fine. But I have friends content enough to hold the pieces of my broken heart, who don't have to alter my story or their own to be in loving relationships, who let me tell my story true and unconfined, and who are honest enough to do the same. And this is the way out, the path to healing and joy and gratitude that we stumble along in a world where being fine is never enough.
My boyfriend left for a long bike ride and returned hours later to find me still lying on the living room floor, lost in the wood ceiling as if it were a blanket of stars. I pretended to have not been crying as he looked at me, confused. He had just been explaining to me the way he can only build guitars out of wood with a specific number of rings within each inch, and I was lost in the magic. I have seen wood all my life, but I don't think I've ever really admired it, I said to him, struck by a wave of emotion. I mean, look at those knots. They're like vaginas all over the ceiling. Though far from surprised by my observation, he sincerely looked at me and asked, "Have you been drinking this morning?" But those rings, they are everywhere. They are the ring around my eyes. They secure raindrops, and every few months they spiral into another season, onto another map. They play back, count down the years of layers forming, shedding. I am not much different. More in tune as I expand, dense and humble, fragile and coarse, rhythm of the wild. If only I too could give the sounds your body shares on dark winter nights. Summer days still springing out spring rain. Staring at the spruce ceiling, I am familiar with those knots. Tattoos of branches that once stemmed from our core. Stretched skin as I grew from my mother's womb, that sacrificed only to give. Even my grandfathers were woodworkers, shifting and shaping surfaces that I grew up having so little appreciation for. I'm convinced that adulting is wishing they'd left me instructions. Would they teach me if they were still here? Did they love the smell of sawdust as much as I have grown to? Wood leaves me at a loss for words, but with a hurricane of thoughts. Its language one of strength and selflessness, and I am learning how to speak. B, my classmate in the history of our lives, and some days my teacher. You add stability to my structure, but you never leave me splinters. When I read the patterns of wood-paneled walls, I think about the first time I saw you. Your blonde hair brushing loosely over candy skull tattoos, telling stories I imagined a timeline of your life up until then. I saw you there, nameless for only a short moment, a stranger for only a short moment, until we burned bridges with the past that we'd never be able to change. Chain smoking the thought that just maybe what we needed to learn in those days was only just beginning to show if we let it.
Let it love us back.
Back to the days we denied ourselves. Healing.
I lost my voice in the summer of 2005, the year my family fell apart for the second time. Being a young child of divorce, I had a well-developed system of support. I had 2 homes with 2 rooms and enough love to make it around the earth thrice and back. Privileged and well-fed with a bed for my head, and yet I wasn't comfortable. In the thick of the sick, you can imagine me as a head on the stick, walking and talking around in the world. Each appendage at a time, I began to define myself without. My arms felt too long and my legs felt too big. I would spend days wagering rations, sometimes without even noticing I was even placing bets. Any habitual pattern will become a normalized behavior if we do it long enough. Sadly, even if the patterns and habits are murderous. Unable to rise above, I was stuck in a fuzz. It's every emotion all at once mixed together in the kitchen blender. With my belly sucked in tight, I thought, I might be able to breathe like this forever. Small sips. Taking into account my almost 6 feet of height at age 13, I became self-conscious of being the biggest student, let alone the biggest girl. And one time in the hallway at school, this kid said, "You have boats for feet." And from that moment on, I tried to sail. My anchor caught in a nail under my skin. pretty sure I spent a majority of my youth attempting to crawl out of myself in secret. I've read that internal tensions can rise most when human being senses itself out of control. We gather coping mechanisms that cause a signal boost. My mind was grabbing onto anything to feel like there were spaces where my choices were available. There was an intense pressure and a wall fell on my heart like a wicked witch in the house, only my boats weren't sticking out. I was crushing myself, and yet it felt external. The water pressure was rising inside of me as if down the middle, as if to divide. My body drifted away from my mind. My mind played games with my heart, and my hands held on too tightly to that idea of control altogether. My secret was gluing me up from the inside out. And from that moment on, for the next decade, I felt hushed into silence. Sickness must have placed a zip tie around my neck very tight. I made myself as small as I could. My eyes defied the reflection. I couldn't even see her really, not even when I primped for hours on end. Sickness of the mind is hard to overcome because it's essentially like kicking yourself when you're already low. Each flick of the foot to the rib delivered as a whisper of low self-confidence from within. And these bass-backward societal standards of beauty gave this disease a nice comfy covering for me to place on top of my head, which at one point I found pretty good at blocking shade. But until I worked through this mindset and started to listen to how I talk to myself, I realized I was often rationalizing how commonplace it was for people to vocally admire and reward sick people for being skinny. That's what anorexia is. It's a sickness. I was able to live amongst the masses without many people commenting negatively because, for a plethora of reasons, skinny is desired by some. To assume skinny ever meant healthy for me would be a lie. As a young person, this translated to skinny and sickness being desirable. It's fucked up. But the ebbs and flows, the way emotions go, I wasn't always low, and that's the tricky part. It's hard to notice that something is wrong when it's just the way you've trained the lights in your mind to signal out. Again, we remember the normalized behaviors, eating this to compensate that. I was feeling my worth by the size of my pants. In fact, I kept all of my old jeans years after I grew out of them in hopes to return to her, I guess. How many people do we know that have done this? How many of us have done this? Do this? Why? Predisposed to a whole lifeline of this warped sense of self, a continued chain of sickness spread out over decades throughout the whole family. A condition that causes one to live in disdain of their own body. To grow up without seeing one woman confident in their skin is the sin here. There really is so much more we could have been talking about. What are we teaching each other by saying mean things to our reflections? What makes me most sad is I remember how every woman I've loved has refrained from looking lovingly like a friend to their own body. But there's no use pointing fingers or trying to follow it up the heritage tree. I'm climbing down now. This ends with me.
It took me so long to learn how to love myself. My heart was a broken pen, its ink smeared across the pages of an empty journal that begged for content. I was fluent in the language of twisted words that pulled from my ex's mouth like a losing game of tug-of-war. He was losing to a lot of things, but mostly to drugs. Each syllable the turn of a rusted screw into my arms that only broke the skin once or twice. I lied all the time. Privileged and well-fed with a bed for my head, and yet I wasn't stable. Imagine screaming for help in a crowd of people who can't hear you. Oftentimes they try to read my lips, but even then, I didn't know what I needed. I grew up in a Kellogg's family, but I do not long for the smell of cereal, stained abruptly in my memories of the first night he threw me with no ground to fall on. I floated in space, with enough visibility to see my elementary playground. Flicked pebbles from my fingers as they once kicked from my feet as I ran from boys who teased me. Tell me now that if he's mean to me, it's because he likes me. Because I could not even turn my head or stand up. But I could still think of a million reasons not to leave him. I lied there by the side of the road for an hour or so, imagining myself with a shovel, digging up my roots and transplanting them anywhere. My breath was choked by tears that found a way around my sides and into my back as if feeding from the tips of the damp spring grass. There was almost enough water to drown me. My nose was met with a sinking smell of cornflakes triggered by the rising sun, and all I could do was think about how disappointed my child self would be in me. A complete failure of a feminist. I'd become so many things I never wanted, tangled into one confused teenage girl. All I could do was wonder, how did I get here?
How did I learn to hate my body? A place where I was born into, yet spent years attempting to crawl out of. From the soft skin of my stomach to the natural roundness of my thighs, at what point do these ever-changing parts of me become pinched and cold? For years I thought, as long as I can feel my hip bones, I'm doing all right. I used it as some sort of checkpoint. At what age did I learn that if I sucked in my stomach for 8 hours a day, that eventually it'll stay that way? Middle school. Moreover, how many years did my digestion struggle because of the pressure? 18. What is the line between purge and starving? Depression. All of my mirrors must have been broken because I can't seem to find the reflection anymore. I can't and couldn't see the woman facing me. No life left in the eyes of her. I feel her sadness encroaching my bliss, but it's not just me. No human can handle their emotions when they're like this. Hungry.
Some days I still don't feel like I belong to myself. I thought I was done healing. But the truth is, when I go quiet, I am writing books in my mind about the ways my stomach holds on. So when we're reading a news story about a woman whose life was stolen from her lover's hands, I need you to understand that it puts a knot in my stomach that has already surpassed its holding capacity, throwing elbows into my lungs, leaving no air for me to breathe. I stop functioning. The only words I have left are rustling themselves off of my tongue, and my hollow eyes have nothing left to fish out of these half-digested conversations that mute me in a crowd of swimming hands. I wonder, how is it that I am still treading water? Quotations hang from one ear to the other, reeds across my neck. Man kills wife for laughing at him. And just like that, he pulls the steering wheel from my hands. Close my eyes as we weave between solid yellow lines of life, and I got lucky that my broken bone could still break his grip. It was so many years ago, but it still revisits my dreams without my consent. Now, when I hear about another mass shooter with a history of domestic violence, I burrow into my boyfriend's arms, but only whisper to myself how afraid I am. He is a haven for me, a godsend that always sleeps on the side of the bed closest to the window because he knows it makes me feel safer. I still lock my doors 3 times in a row, carry a knife and a clenched fist and deny that I worry at all. It's too easy to fall face down into years past, to pencil in another collision of what ifs, but really, what if we didn't have reason to be so afraid?
I've become quite the electrician. rewiring my brain and redirecting its power, focus, and transparency. Clouded versions of myself that when comparing characteristics, I've convinced myself into considering her the better than. It's really unhealthy. There's a small place inside of me that when fed craves all the things that were killing me, but now I find it shrinking, sinking well below the surface. Not really anything you can see with the naked eye, but when I'm naked, it has surely tried to remind me of all the ways I've hated myself. All the things that parts of me whisper are equal to the hate speech sung into my ear like the sword of an ex-lover. It's almost funny how thick my skin can be when I'm the wordsmith with a sword. Once again, I'm noticing growth in new places, which is helpful. I can go shopping now without starving myself of the very dreams I've worked so hard to obtain. Dreams of love and kindness and acceptance and joy. Dreams of health and strength and the ability to see myself as more than a body, as more than a woman, as more than a pretty person. I did not choose these rules to live by, or this skin sack or eye color or hair, even the distance between my shoulders and knees, but I can love them now more completely than ever because I can see that all of these things make me me.
I've always had a fascination with the way things are rooted. I want to know the way you grow from this earth when your arms are full of green, yet you sit atop a surface so rugged and worn.
I see you locked down during every storm, buckle your knees and brace for the ocean's tantrum that spits and crashes the only thing you stand on.
How do you survive when your roots grow into something so unforgiving?
When the wind howls, I drop another anchor, but you?
You stay grounded, arms above your head as if to halt September storms.
What is it that drives them to make laws around my body, like ropes binding me to the ideas casted down over centuries? I think about all the women who have lived before me, being shunned, being hung, being burned for being bright and vocal, being beaten for letting your light shine. What kind of sick joke is that? Like a simple game of telephone, the abilities of women are and have been misjudged and spread. Sadly, there is weight to bear in the undertones of whispered lies. There is no need to fear the power that lies within my heart. Between my truth and the disillusioned assumptions one can make about what makes me a woman. Tell the people that the ability to grow someone inside of me is my fault. A great test that has inspired me, it bubbled up inside of me since blood seeped from between my legs. Tell me again why women cannot be trusted. Show me your research that proves superiority of the sexes, because I happen to believe that people can just love each other as if love is all that matters. And I believe in trust and give and take. There's magic that happens when you think and speak your truth. Don't let fear get you down now. Haven't you heard that gender is simply a social construct, passed down like a bad cold infecting the minds and stunting growth? Listen to the words sung into your ear by your dear loving mother. Each of our tissues entangled by science and woven with love. How can she be less than worthy of your respect simply based on the chromosomes that calculate her makeup? Use your brain. Think real hard.
My gloves are cold and damp, saturated with the stench of fish and sweat. I have woken up in a postcard again, or maybe on a roller coaster that cruises up and over 8-foot swells for 5 days. I haven't worked an 8 to 5 in 2 years. Instead, I wipe splatters of fish blood from my face, hold their hearts in my hand and feel them beat, a rhythm just like these waves beneath my feet. Have you ever held a heart that gives you life? I imagine it as the feeling my mother had the first time she held me, whispered, You will do so much good in the world. I watched her nurture, watched her weave the loose ends of our lives together, watched women be the tool that transformed yarn into clothing, a baby into a being, watched them fight to belong to a world they've held together with calloused hands, receiving so little in return. I learned selflessness from their tired eyes. I learned toughness from miscarriage, an elevator speech of everything my mother sacrificed for me. And now, as my body levitates with the movement of the ocean, my toes are like white caps, curling under to find balance, to make sense of why it just seems so typical of mankind to threaten a species that has done nothing but exist and nurture. I thank salmon as I pull them aboard, promise them that I will never support an industry that seeks to replace them, handle them like stained glass reflecting off the sun. They will carve years into our future, nourish those I'm tied to by time and tradition, give and take. Their scales are a shield over my heart, protect me from what is not humble, fierce, or wild. I have never felt so rich as the moment I first placed my hand on their meat. Red, gold, glow like they are our survival. They have become my survival. I have spent years wondering if I would be a spruce tree or a hemlock, but my needles are neither sharp nor well-rounded. It wasn't until I watched salt water merge with blood, a vibrant red that I'd only ever seen between my legs, that I realized I have always been a salmon. Each scale, a story of remembering. The coast jumper cables to my veins, gives me energy for life on days that feel too heavy to heal. Alaska did not introduce me to connection, but it taught me to connect silence with self-love, solitude with content. It led by example and showed me how to choose a place that does not compromise my well-being, to love the person who only holds my heart with positive intent, to grow past what I'd ingrained in myself to resent. I will always fight to reach the stream that allows the most resilience. That is the only way for me.
Sometimes I get lost in feeling everything at once, bubbling over with happy and sad and fear and doubt. But I also can't quiet the parts of me that want to shout, keep going, you've got this. I have all these whispered thoughts. Am I doing it right? Am I trying hard enough, giving enough, being enough, loving enough? Yes. It's heavy, but I'm strong. I wasn't always, she wasn't, I wasn't. She is me, we are we, all these versions of ourselves comparing each other to the reflecting light beams that are cross us upside down in our eyes, playing it out in our minds over again. Conversations and scenarios, what I would have said, should have, could have, but didn't. Take a few breaths. We are all on a path. It took me forever to find my way back here, man. How long was your journey? I don't know how you survived it, but I'm proud of you. Your heart is still soft and still trying to grow. It wasn't easy, and yet we persisted. How do we make sense of everything we remember? I always pictured it like our minds have these filing cabinets. Someone's playing basketball or hula hooping in there. Gravity plays defense, cabinet falls open, and something gets jostled to the forefront of my frontal lobe. When you really think of it, it's all just signals and pulses. Electric brain magic keeping us who we think we are, who we've decided in our minds we should be. And if that's the case, then we must be more in control of our bliss than we've allowed ourselves to admit. Look up to the sky and open your arms real wide, stretching your wings out to the side. Inhale and exhale, reminding your brain this body is alive. Learning to live in and out of love. Learning to just be.
I have tried to write this piece for months. The love one. I haven't quite written one like this before. I started it in Pelican, Alaska. As I peeled back layers of rotten lettuce, entertaining a crowd of fishermen as I recited, "He loves me not. He loves me not. He loves me." There is humility to living in a remote fishing town. For 3 months, I emailed B working pieces of the show from underneath the awning of the library, the only place in town to access Wi-Fi. Always pressed tightly against the siding, but never successful in dodging the rain, so I'd type a few lines and wring out my left sleeve. Repeat. I tried again to start writing it when I reached Haines. I thought the year we lived in between moving into our new place would be the perfect space to write. But my boyfriend introduced me to Game of Thrones, and I spent my quiet moments alone, imagining the sounds of cracking branches as footsteps of White Walkers. Third time is a charm. I cracked open my notebook outside of a coffee shop in DC on my 25th birthday, looking down to examine the bottom of my shoes, just to realize the whole city kind of smells like dog shit. But for whatever reason, I couldn't put my pen down. I was going to write about long-distance love, about bittersweet goodbyes boarding a 5-hour ferry just to watch myself drift away from him ever so slowly, again. He handles it better than I do, but I keep my watch on Alaska time to help myself feel closer. I'd be lying, though, if I said that long-distance love wasn't just as sweet as it is bitter. The miles and minutes apart have inserted chapters into my life, little spacers that, when pressed, whisper to my conscience, there is something more to learn here. I can't deny that there are times I've whispered back, God damn it, again? Patience has not always been present in my life, but I have opened the door for it. I am trying. I watch his fingers dance up the neck of his guitar, imagine all the things that have been created by his hands, and the time that it took. Years spent building the same guitar, the same house. He set such a good example for me on how to live and work creatively, patiently. He is so many of the things that I want to learn, so many of the things that have been lost in translation from one generation to the next in my family. At what point in their lives did they decide that the ability to build a shelter over our heads is less valuable than a college degree? I ask him to help me find my way back to the core, to the farmers and the carpenters, the fishermen and the loggers, to the smell of the crackling wood stove where my words are always bubbling over onto another page. I kick the blankets off my feet to avoid the heat, but realize I am still in bed alone. It'll be another month until I can go home. It is never as cozy this way, but I get to spread to all four corners, so it's not so bad. I've always been fine on my own. My mind constantly occupied training for the marathon of every moment I plan to write about. My body teetering to find the sweet spot between productive and balanced. To be honest, not much has changed since I fell in love. I eat dinner at a table now, but I still pee with the door open. I find myself looking for the quiet moments, which is nothing out of the ordinary for me. I just get to share them now, and I'm growing pretty fond of that. This love we are building is a mosaic of our past and present. We don't know yet what will be the final product, but right now, it produces the most beautiful colors. And I know it will be forever framed on my wall of all things that have been good for me.
We went camping at our favorite spot. It was sunny all week, and then we spent the day setting up in the rain. But luckily, everything's fun with you, between making lunch, soup and Sammy's, and making games out of dumping the giant water collection that was sagging our easy up structure. The first day just passed us by. I woke with my back flat against the earth and broken limbs. We were floating at one point, but there must be a small hole in the raft because we went down fast, deflated. Thrusting seeds for the future, planting hope and sprouting dreams. We planned for this, cultivating our future with intention, over and over. I rolled and moaned with the moonlit shadows of my lover shining down on me. Then we leave split pieces of our ancestors together in the pit, ceremoniously honoring their commitment to rituals. Today there was no rain. We will romp on through the woods where he asked me to promise him forever. Together, us, him and me, and now we. I remember it perfectly. He had prepared a sign made of old woven fabric and perched it up on the tallest trees with ropes on the dune. Even before this, but especially now, he has me. And for that, I feel so dang lucky. You see, I dodged this love. I didn't find myself worthy in the beginning. It's really hard to let someone love you if you don't love yourself, you know? And for being completely honest, there are numerous moments of self-sabotaging, but here we are. We've come so far from our MySpace days. He went from my top 8 to my number 1, just like that. How does the time fly so fast? We've moved together and on our own. From those first 8 months where I lived in your mother's basement with you, driving 40.9 miles just to sleep in the same bed, and those few months there where I just never left. Even back then we were inseparable, and here we are, 9 years in. 9 years of laughing, 9 years of becoming, 9 years of pressing our lip skins together, chin to chin, still magic like the first time in your truck in the drive. And as I slept with my head perfectly tucked in the crevice of your shoulder, as strong as I feel these days, I feel so thankful for a love so bright to show me a way back to myself and my own reflection. How I grew into wanting to be the woman you saw in me. I find myself in awe of our commitment to happiness. Promises to not to marinate this life in petty drama or bullshit arguments, none of that. Promises to keep our voices low and full of love. Something that has taken me years to practice, but it always so simply comes down to love is respect, and you never let me forget that. Growing up with someone is hard, I think, because you have to get all of your wrinkles out with someone else watching. I soul search as I dive deep in your heart space. We support each other like lovers do, and like friends. Holding up and holding on that for the sheer hope that love is all that really matters in this life. Finding it, meaning it, and letting it change and grow. You know, like we all need space to do.
had my first adult pedicure this last year in preparation for my brother's wedding. I cringed as I watched months of work sanded down into soft, fragile skin. Grinded my teeth as if trying to hold back my natural tendency to release a sarcastic yet serious fuck from between my teeth. My calloused feet have never read ugly as much as they have monumental. To me, at least. They are a result of tiresome days. Moving sheets of plywood in 3 feet of snow. Learning how to use a skill saw for the first time. I tried to feel grateful towards my new, shiny feet, but really I was internalizing the blisters that would form in the coming months. I was mourning the loss of my dead skin. If moving several times a year has tried to teach me anything, it is what is worth taking and what is worth leaving behind. Alas, my trunk is still full of useless shit I don't need. I think about mental junk significantly more, piled irrationally in crates atop my shoulders, always restricting my movement, so when it's heaviest I tend to be stuck in the same place. Bea was with me the first time I looked in, helped me lift the heavy crates onto her and John's living room floor, leaving traces of squares in their carpet. It was not on the agenda, but I kept complaining about how much my aching joints kept me up at night, and to be honest, I forgot how much I'd been carrying. We peeled old photos from the back of my throat, gagged as I remembered his hands pushing me, now lifting themselves off, as I unpacked aloud for the first time my memories of him. Some layers are meant to be shed. That dead skin leaves no purpose but to weigh me down. I had told myself it would protect me from new wounds, a theory that failed time and again. I began to see stark differences between growing and avoiding. I came across crates of items that never belonged to me, stored away on my sore shoulders, collecting dust. I had to return them, but oftentimes their owners refused. Their existence sits easier when we're trying not to see them, I guess. A friend once told me that healing happens in layers, and it was evident as we reached inside of ourselves, examining every throb of our hearts. I hadn't known much about eating disorders before I met Bea, but I'd undoubtedly been impacted by pressures to be thin. My old college roommates once posted photos of Victoria's Secret models on the cupboards, encouraging us to think twice before we grabbed something to eat. It was a constant plea for discomfort, deprivation at its finest, and it made me so angry. Food her enemy for over 10 years, and yet we expect that relationship to diminish in one counseling session, in one moment, in one single layer. Our scars are often far deeper than we think they are. But I watched her dig out the rotted dirt in the cracks of her hard-working hands. I watched her open her mind, open her heart to food. I watched her realize that a busy bee can't quite function without fuel. I don't have any kids, and I'm not sure yet if I ever will. But I can imagine her mother's love as I watched Bea grow. I may not have been around during her childhood, but I was there when she took her first steps as a business owner. I sat and watched the series of her relationship with John, thriving from a tiny house with crooked floors into marriage, a garden in the backyard, a baby in her belly. All things that grew from love, but also from healing, from unpacking, learning to love our core before we could love outside of ourselves. And now over the years, we have toned up our muscles to help lift each other up, to pull each other in, holding our arms open to welcome those who doubt us when we say, the future will be different. The future will be brighter.
I At the end of the world, I could try to save it all with broken hands, mending our swollen lungs with an elixir made of hope wrapped tightly with smooth strips of the thinnest love thread, realizing we can heal from here. We can rise, we can sing, we can dance to the beats in our hearts and hear the song from within us, moving us further towards becoming. Remembering there's no wasted time, but rather hidden trails and detours. We often find our way back when we keep ourselves open to saying yes, and taking and making our place in this space what we deserve. Keeping the heart open allows one to ask the real questions. What is the standard in which you hold yourself accountable? Do you have a list of deal breakers for your own actions? What and where do you desire to be? Without fear, own it out loud. If you're shy, it's okay if you only want to whisper it too, but say it loud enough for yourself to hear. Maybe make a list and place it on all of your cupboards. Recite it every morning as a mantra of how you want your life to be. Maybe you write a whole show and perform it in front of all of your friends and your family with your best friend on a stage. Maybe, just maybe, then you'll remember just how much love you have in this world. So much love from within and from the outside, seeping and softening in all the hardened parts. Slowly, something happens. When the moon is full and the time feels like it's just on the edge of bright and scary, we can get up off our rumps and do that, be that thing, without doubt. Even if doubt is there, you can go forward with courage, putting thoughts into feelings, into action. There is so much actual work that goes into changing yourself. For me, it was honesty. Like truly being real with my intentions and with myself for what I wanted in this life. I had to hold my own hand and go to the places where the work could be done. Allow yourself that freedom. Do the work. I promise. Then you'll start to feel better.
I am saying it out loud that this body is an ocean. It decides where the shore begins, where it ends. It shapes each rock with the strength of each wave, one wave at a time. It does not determine the weather, but it tries to listen, to rage to the wind's whistle, to lie still in sorbet-shaded sunsets. My mind, a tide, exhales driftwood, thrashed by words, smoothed by time. Carry my baggage to shore, further, please. Inhale imprints into the sand. Leave behind the skeleton of my mistakes, of his rage. Help, harness my sanity with an anchor, but don't let me drown, body. We fought too hard for this current. Pull me from my past, beneath my feet, let me tumble in this, wake me up. This body is not your bycatch. This body will catch you, cradle you in my swell. Swear to me, body, that you will never surrender to the open sea, that we will move swiftly, sliding through clumps of slippery kelp, never so slow that our limbs would intertwine. Tangle in what is tangible, but never, ever enough. Bear with me, body. We are learning what is enough.
Like a wave against the side of a boat, your love comes crashing in once again. With miles extending out in all directions, I still honor the roads that brought us together. A friendship that I needed before I even knew who I was looking for. Someone who could pump up my sails and help me realize that I had the wind within me the whole time. Reminders of our own capabilities can cause us to capsize if we aren't balanced, but with you, your timing was always on my radar. And the space your heart craved gave me room to soar far above myself and who I even thought I was. Just like day one, we sat and laugh about all the things. These calls are few and far between, but whenever your name pops up on my screen, I scream. And the world around me stops, and we are connected again. Like always, like nothing has changed. And With us in particular, I don't think it ever will. But once the call ends, I realize magic happens when you lick your own wounds and mend your own frayed edges. You realize your own ability to survive, as if your will is the way arms and legs can cut through water, and love is the life vest. Together, these components will keep you alive. With a healing potion on the tip of your tongue, moisten the area and note. One shall apply equal pressure to the mind and body. In order to heal, we must let ourselves feel. Lie back, flat on your back, and assess your extremities from the heart outward. Deep breaths in this space will clean out all the excess garbage you've been carrying around. We honor these walls, and at the same time, we let them fall. We admire how far we've come. From the ground upwards, these legs have carried us to and from, up hills and back down. They have formed the shape of puzzles entangled with our lovers. They have led us to one another. They have peeled, and like most things living, they have healed. With time, we have healed with time. Every time I question if I'm making the right moves or going the right way, I stop and think of you, Rose, and how far you've came and went. You are never here to stay put, and I love that. This friendship somehow reminds me that we are not our bodies, but we must work with our bodies to live organically in the vessel that encompasses our spirit. We need to trust. Something you've taught me so much about. As I embark on another journey, I place my hand on my chest and my belly. Inhale and exhale. Smile and find the sun. While miles apart, I still hear my best friend's words in my heart. Just fucking do it.
It has always seemed so simple with you, that our dreams were never too far to reach, to work towards. You know, so many people shrugged with doubt at our idea to write a show from 3,000 miles apart, but it really wasn't that hard. And I think that's what I've come to value most about our friendship, that you only make it easier for me to do the things that make me feel whole. Your existence is a reflection of my own progress, of the healing that began the moment you stepped into my life.
I've written and mailed dozens of letters, a paper trail following you all over this damn planet, telling you how thankful I am for you, confessing all of my secrets in all these different ways. I'm thankful for your friendship and your bravery to try new things, like becoming a social worker, and then, like magic, a salmon entrepreneur. It's really funny and random, but at the same time, it makes total sense. Because you believed in yourself. To figure out a completely different world surrounded by strangers just because you wanted it. And it's that courage that pushes me closer to my edge, to myself every day. I knew there was someone like you in this world. I knew it. I think I said it best in 2014, the year you turned 22 for your birthday. I wrote it in a haiku. Sometimes we find them, the ones that share our dreams for everything at once. Thank you. So before anyone gets up or goes anywhere, we're going to do the raffle real quick because that's really fun. I'm going to read all of the fun raffle prizes that hopefully you were able to scope out back there. And then if I call your name, just go back there. Or if I call your number, I guess, you can get like super excited or whatever. And then the 4 lucky winners can go back there and then be very nice about it. But y'all can duke it out and see whichever ones you want. So the 4 prizes that were donated were a private yoga session for Katie Jo, who you just saw. And that is also coupled with a Juice Nation gift card. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a massage from me. Yay. And that's with a tea package from Mary from Into Tea. And Rose, that's the tea that we gave you today. And that is from Eastern Market. Rose's friend that she met at Eastern Market, and she's just the sweetest lady. So you're lucky if you win that. And then some smoked salmon from Shoreline Wild Salmon. Wonder where we got that.
Shocker.
And then also a basket of goodies from my friend Lisa, who does Campspired, and it's a little like fairy house workshop thing. It's so cute. So without further ado, we will pick 4 lucky winners. Yes, please. So. Number 14. Yay! Which is so fitting. That was actually number 2. 35. Oh. Hey. Number 22. Yay. And now we just have a few little like sappy thank yous to say, and then you can all just go. So I'll start by saying thanks to my lovely husband, John. Outside of being just like a fantastic human being, he also made us our poster, and he brought me lunch, and he just like is awesome. And then also Dan Hartley for snapping photos for us. And for my friend Jake for doing video, and my sister Bree for making cookies for us.
We'd like to give a special shout out to the Robin Theater for this beautiful space to perform and for allowing us to book this space before we'd even written our show or knew what it was going to be about. Thank you also to everyone who volunteered for the show to help us get set up. My parents as well, thank you. Let me see. Last but not least, thank you to Katie, Joe, Phil, Ryan, Brandon, and Nancy for your voice and movements to our show. We love you, and we are so grateful for your contribution.
Thank you. If y'all want to come up here, we got you fly over there.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.